The Prayer of Job. It was based upon being funny off of the Prayer of Jabez. And it was talking about everybody who buys the book realizes that problems can only get worse. It's a great discouragement book, and it's not flying off the shelves at all. People are being discouraged left and right with this book called The Prayer of Job. So it's just a very funny book. It's not real, but it's very funny to read the article because apparently the sales gimmick is it comes with its own stick-on boils. It's an amazing thing. But again, that's not for everybody. I thought it was funny, really, but the article is hilarious, and that's why I didn't share it with you except for the highlights. I just wanted to put some bait in the water to see if it had any life, and it doesn't. So anyway, it was funny to me. It was really good. Anyway, I really enjoyed going through Job, but we're going to go on to other things. Speaking of being offended, by the way, some of you are equal opportunity offenders. You're actually just good at it. Some of you have your masters. Some of you have your doctorates in offending. And you're pretty much I know who you are, and I'm not going to look at you guys, but there's a few of you in the room that I think you do have a couple of doctorates, because it's like, I don't care. I'm just going to tell you anyway, and boom. So anyway, we're gonna not just talk to you. We're going to talk to everybody else in the room. So don't think that I'm picking on you, because this is totally a human condition. This is not, just some of you are better at others, that's all. But this is, speaking of being offended, I read this and I thought, this sounds offensive just listening to it. August 5th was National Mustard Day. I did not know that. But rather than celebrating with a hot dog or a burger smothered in the yellow condiment, the French's company wants you to try mustard Skittles. Right on. NBC New York reported in July, Skittles is always looking to inspire moments of everyday happiness and deliver unexpected ways for fans to experience the brand. It combines their tangy mustard flavor with an iconic chewy texture to deliver this unique summer treat. So there is a sweepstakes that is just now ending that you could actually win a whole bag of mustard Skittles. So if you really are adventurous, but that sounds pretty daggum offensive to me. So it is true that guys can be cruel to one another. I know ladies can do the same thing, especially young girls. I've seen some vicious stuff in youth ministry where I thought, man, that's guy territory. That's to a whole nother level, the way girls can really be catty to one another. But guys can be cruel, cutting down one another, even into old man age. Just come to men's group. It starts out as little boys. They're hitting one another, shooting BBs at one another. And I tell most guys, if you ever had a BB gun, you've done BB wars, right? Without eye protection. For real, we did that, yeah. And you get the welts. In college, I learned how to do penny wars, where you could take a ping, and they would actually ping, and you leave welts. And yeah, guys just kind of do that kind of thing. So the older we get, we figure out hitting one another just hurts. And so you do different things to be offensive to one another, because insults are easier, and apparently they don't hurt as much. But we trade verbal jabs for a while until, what? Somebody gets offended. And then, I was just joking around. And then all of a sudden, feelings are hurt. We're not talking to one another. This is the kind of stuff that we're going to be kind of camping out on. So to start our series off in Living an Unoffendable Light, this series looks like it's got 2 weeks to it. So don't fear. You only have 2 weeks. At least I'm thinking so. I wanted to show you some of the verbal jabs it might look like to lead to our souls being wounded and offended. In the early 1930s, I don't know who was alive in the 30s here, but in the 1930s, I'm going to guess probably no one. It's just a guess. Playwright Claire Booth Luce approached a doorway at the same time that satirist Dorothy Parker did. Luce stepped aside, saying, "Age before beauty." When Parker stepped through the door, she looked back and said, "Pearls before swine." Yeah, that's pretty rough for really, very well-to-do women at one another saying these kind of things. Another is a display by a guy named James Whistler. You may remember he did a painting or something of his mom. Okay, late 19th century Victorian artist. He's the famous guy that did his mama. Anyway, real nice picture. I guess it's worth a lot of money. He showed little respect to the hierarchy of profession in his day. When his poodle fell ill with a throat infection, which I don't know how you tell when a poodle has a throat infection, just me saying, I just don't know. He sent immediately for the country's leading ear, nose, and throat doctor, a specialist named Sir Morrell Mackenzie. The doctor was not amused when he was shown his patient, and he conducted a thorough examination, wrote out a prescription, left with his fee, and the next day Whistler received a message asking him to call on Mackenzie without delay. Fearing some development of the poodle's condition, Whistler hurried to the doctor's house. "So good of you to come, Mr. Whistler," said Mackenzie as his visitor was shown in. "I heard that you were a painter, and my front door needs repainting." So, we know how to actually give jabs to one another. Unfortunately, as Christians, unfortunately, we're really too good at it. It probably has happened to us once or another. Someone has offended us by what they said, what they didn't say, what they did, what they didn't do, how they looked at us, how they didn't look at us. Webster's dictionary says an offense is something that outrages the senses. When someone is offended, they are often hurt, they are often wounded, insulted, disappointed, irritated, and angry, and continuing with those adjectives as well. The word offense, and I've probably spoken this before using the word offense, or offend, comes from the Greek word scandalon. Using an illustration of like a rat trap or something like that, it's actually the bait of a trap, something that you go for that has a trap mechanism to it. If you've ever watched the series Alone, where they're out there doing snares and traps and all kinds of deadfalls to be able to trap food. It's the bait of a trap or a snare. It's also a word that can mean stumble or stumbling block, which causes us to fall, trip, or stumble. The Old Testament word is primarily used contextually as sin, that which causes us to sin or a transgression towards God. It can be a transgression towards someone else too. They use that word, but mainly it's a sin against God. In the New Testament, the word scandalon refers to that which makes our hearts stumble or others stumble. We do not want to step into the bait of a trap, to watch out Satan's schemes, all those pieces about guarding our hearts to sin. So guarding from the scandalon. Also, what we don't want to do is be scandalon to someone else. And so guarding ourselves from actually making others stumble. All right, our word is to offend someone else or to take an offense ourselves. So it goes both ways. We can offend someone or be offended. In Matthew 13, 55 through 57, it says this, "Isn't this the carpenter's son?" Remember this? "Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and his own home." Now in the Message, it reads a little different. Eugene Peterson usually does some really cool things with language, and then other times you go, he took a little liberty there. So I'm honest enough to be able to go, there's some parts of the Message that sound pretty cool, and in other parts you go, that's kind of cartoonish. But anyway, he says in the Message, at the end of 56 and 57, he says, "Who does he think he is? They got their noses all out of joint." So they were offended by him making these claims and who he was. Offense is the act of provoking, annoying, irritating, and causing pain and injury. It's also the feeling of a reaction the offense produces. For example, it is indignation, resentment, anger, that which leads to breaking of relationships. Some of you are familiar with this internal struggle that you have of people that you either can't look in the eye or you can't have a conversation with anymore, or may not even, they're in the room and I need to walk around the other way. And that's painful. You know that's painful because some of that is really real. When someone sins against us, our fists go in the air, our flesh strikes up, our blood pressure increases, and we demand to be righted from the wrong that has happened with us. I have been wrong, and this needs to be made right. So let me just break it down really simple, cartoon-like. Offense, broken down, is a hurt that is held on to. An offense is a hurt that is held on to. That's really what it is. Someone can describe others as being, oh, you're kind of weak, you're easily offended. Any little thing that I might say just sets you off. And others can maybe brag that, well, it takes a lot to offend me. You can say just about anything to me. And, it just kind of just brushes off like water on a duck's back. But we can all, and I mean all, myself included, can all be hurt and offended internally and make it like it's nothing and still hang on to that and harbor it. And it's the same stuff. If you were to outright, I'm really hurt and I'm offended, it is actually, in fact, more poisonous for us to hang on to it. The reaction to offense can manifest itself with a lot of different manifestations, if you will. Anger, blowing up, being outrageous, wanting revenge, defending ourselves, and sometimes even fighting. Slowly, unresolved offenses can build up over time by multiple offenses or unchecked stuff that we've never really confessed and let go of. What does it lead to? Being lonely, being bitter, being vulnerable, being more easily offended in the future, perpetually untrusting, can leave us depressed, and it can leave us weak. Now, I don't know if this makes sense to anybody, but this is what we're going to do these next 2 weeks, because this is a very common human deal. It's part of our sin stuff. So, which is our first point. Being offended is reality of sin. I didn't say it's a sin, but it can be a sin. It is a reality of sin. In Matthew 24, this is out of the New King James Version, Jesus teaches us that in the end, and then many will be offended. The NIV does not use this. It's still the scandalon word here. This word offended in the Greek, scandalon, some of you will say maybe stumble or fall or trip, something like that, may be one of your versions. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, Jesus' words, and hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Now, if you haven't seen this in people who were once excited about coming to Jesus, and all of a sudden, all kinds of things that happen, offenses, things that didn't get the heart protected well, and then all of a sudden, where are they? Angry. You ever hear anybody who I can't go to church anymore because this is what's happened to me? They've got the story of offense. This was said over and over again, and then I'm never going back either to that church, or I'm not going back to church anymore. I'm not doing any of that stuff because of this hurt that has been held on to. Now, if you look at the progression of these verses, it's just amazing. The word many will be offended, that many will, is better translated most will be offended. Because of hurt, pain, or betrayal, Jesus says that we will betray one another. If you've been married, if you've had children, or if you've had parents, any relationship where you were in that and you didn't have any choice, but you're in this thing and you're going to be betrayed. You're going to be hurt. You're going to be sinned against. That's why people end up being hermits or get lonely, because they want to go, I ain't doing any of this stuff anymore. Why? I'm tired of getting hurt. And so the part of being one who loves like Christ is accepting the vulnerability that comes with being close. That's actually part of the price that you go, if I'm going to be close, if I'm going to be truly married and intimate with my spouse, I'm buying into the fact that I'm marrying another human being, like myself. And we're both human beings, and we have this capability to actually really hurt one another. And when I was first married and young, I still talked like I talked with single Christians who were guys. That doesn't work. I'm telling you, it does not work. It took years and years to figure out that going, hey, I was just joking, didn't mean anything to Elaine. It didn't. I mean, I could rip with the best of them And just like that's the way you talk, hey, and you did it, and you're in youth ministry. I was 5 years in youth ministry already, in inner city street youth ministry in Cincinnati, where it was just pretty easy to talk pretty freely. And you know what? When you're married, it doesn't translate the same. And then you got to figure out the learning curve of going, how many years did I actually do this really bad? And continue to be a learner at my age to go, what really blesses my wife? How can I understand her to be able to speak lovingly and not offensively? So, because of hurt and pain and betrayal, Jesus says that we will betray one another. And betrayal in the New Testament means to hand over or to deliver. That's the extent of removing ourselves from helping someone else. This is the picture that you see when they said they handed Jesus over. They handed him over. He handed himself over. This idea, more specifically, that Peter denies knowing Jesus. That's that, I don't know, I'm stepping back. This is not my deal. Then betrayal leads to hatred to one another. This is Jesus' words, this progression. Proverbs 18:19 says this, an offended brother, man, this is full right here. An offended brother is more unyielding than a fortified city. And contentions between people are like the bars of a castle. Contention and offense. Man, it destroys relationships. It can destroy them for a long time, too. And you know what I'm talking about? I haven't spoken to my brother in 20 years. What? Can't do it. I haven't spoken to my son or my daughter in 3 years. This stuff is real. There's been tension, there's been hurt, and I'm going to tell you this thing is lived out every single day. And some of y'all are still living it with people that you really love and who love you. The city in the Old Testament was protected and defended by walls. In the New Testament, that word is translated strongholds, the strongholds in our life. We are seeing this offense played out so tragically in our nation right now. And in our globe, we are continually being divided in areas of politics, with viruses, with war, with economy, and with gender. We can only be united with the love of Christ. That's all. That's all we get, and it's everything that we need. Healing comes by forgiving one another, and may I just add, forgiving one another quickly. The quicker that you forgive, even when it doesn't feel right, even when you don't feel like you want to, even when you go, I'm still upset, forgiving quickly means you get freer quicker. And who doesn't want to be free? Because I'm telling you, hanging on to offense is a burden. It is a load that you don't have to carry. And the more that you actually blame the other person, the longer you get to carry it. The heart of God is to love people and to give and to give and to give and to give. He is generous to pour out to his people. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're always giving money to your kids because they're 42 and they still can't pay their rent. That's not what I'm talking about when give. You can actually give love in ways that doesn't include monetary stuff. There's a way to be able to pour out, because what happens when you actually go, I'm stopping this, you're making me mad, therefore I'm offended by you asking again, therefore I can't love you anymore. So you can still pour out and still say no's. So I just want that to be kind of a little addendum, clear part in that. So, God is generous. He treats us as heirs. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So we are treated hugely kindly. But when hurt is hung on to, we'll say things like, I don't want to get hurt again, or I don't want to hurt anymore. So what do they or we do? We build up walls. We build up strongholds to protect ourselves. I will seek protection for myself over the benefit of the relationship. I can kick you to the curb because you got all kinds of issues while I stay alone in my own fortress. Because you ain't going to hurt me anymore. You are not getting the opportunity. It's a lonely place to live. And I think that prevents us from loving people fully. I think that's why and how offenses can lead to betrayal. And it leads to hatred, as Jesus said. Hatred in the New Testament church means loveless. If I can be honest with you, hatred does not always have to have emotion attached with it that's angry and has a fist up. Hatred doesn't have to look like that. You know what hatred looks like in the New Testament? It's the lack of love. Now, it's the same way with light. Darkness is the absence of light. You don't go, let me turn on the dark. Dark means no light. It's the same thing with cold. It's the absence of heat. Take away heat, then you get cold. You take away love, that's the Bible word for hate. You don't have to go, yeah, I'm just steaming and mad. Like, if I go, I ain't going to be hurt by you anymore, I'm not going to have a relationship with you anymore, I'm actually hating you. That's the New Testament word, if you really want to get to it. This idea of saying, I'm choosing, because of my hurt, not to love you anymore or get close, and I'm so hurt and I'm so offended, and I'm going to block you off. I'm not looking at you. I can't see you kindly or lovingly. That's the Bible word for hate. The lack of love is being hateful. So when we talk, this is when Jesus says, you know, when you hate something, that's the word he's using for the lack of love. Christian writer and professor Lawrence Richards says this: we can best understand hatred not so much as an emotion, but as a value judgment expressed in a choice to have nothing to do with what is hated. Man, that's brutal. You can see why offense is a big deal. There are some Christians who walk in bondage to continual hurt all the time. And once you become an old person, an old man or old woman, and you've held on to that all this time, man, you're an ugly human being. You just get around like, I'm serious, you get someone and they go, man, they're just nasty to be around. They're just, I don't feel good. I feel dirty. I feel like I'm never liked. I can't have a conversation without being put down. And so you get into this and it's like, you build this wall and this little island with yourself. And they love God, but have somehow resisted submitting their sensitive feelings to the Lord. Unfortunately, touchy Christians are sensitive about too many things. They spend their time hurt or their disgust at people or circumstances that actually intercepts worship and their growth in the Lord and their relationship with others. When we recognize others who may be too sensitive, we must go the extra mile, not only to avoid offending them, but we also want to be aware of any sensitivity, even if it's brought about by their own personal struggles. There often seems to be a chip on somebody's shoulder, which is quick to misinterpret things as mostly being offensive. They usually blame their other things on other people, their offenses on others, fail to recognize their own touchiness. And Jesus, as you know, refers to this in Matthew 7 as a person who sees the speck in another person's eye, but a board in their own. You remember the text out of Matthew 7. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite. First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove this speck. You know, once you get a plank out of your eye, it's hard to see specks. It's just saying. It's just saying. Too often, we willingly surrender our joy and live in defeat because them, those people, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody else but you. Them have offended us. They've hurt us. It's not uncommon to stop going to church, quit a ministry, and eventually hold grudges, become bitter, and eventually hate the other person. Hebrews 12:15 says, see to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. Listen to the word of the scripture in Peterson's view of this same one. This is the second time I'm doing message. Thank you for your grace. Hebrews 12:14 through 17. I'm going to read the whole thing out of the Message. Work at getting along with each other and with God. Otherwise, you'll never get so much as a glimpse of God. Make sure no one gets left out of God's generosity. Keep a sharp eye out for weeds of bitter discontent. A thistle or two gone to seed can ruin a whole garden in no time. Those of you that planted stuff know what I'm talking about. Watch out for the Esau syndrome. trading away God's lifelong gift in order to satisfy a short-term appetite. You well know how Esau later regretted that impulsive act and wanted God's blessing, but by then it was too late, tears or no tears. Yeah, a little liberty with Eugene, but okay. Number 2, the sickness of harboring an offense or having it held on to. So this second point it comes from the previous verse in Matthew 24:10 and 12. Many will be offended, then will betray one another, and then will hate one another. And verse 12, and because of the increase of sin, the love of many will grow cold. When we allow an offense to ferment in our heart, it causes serious spiritual consequences. In these verses in Matthew 24, Jesus named 3 dangerous results: betrayal, hatred, and cold love. And when we're offended by someone we care for, we must go to them. We've got to go to them. I don't care how scary it is. I don't care if you've prejudged your credit and said, oh, they're going to get mad. They won't receive it well. They'll probably, because I've done it. I've gone to people and I go, man, I don't want this anymore. And I mean, I've gone to superiors and then just had it dump loaded on me like, well, that didn't go very well. But it was still the right and obedient thing to do. Why? I didn't carry it anymore. Or I could have doubled down. Wow, they received it poorly. They actually ended up blaming my whole confession back on me. Jerk. You see the difference? The way you can go, man, I've been released. I've given this away. God, I've walked in obedience to you. Or I just got dumped on, and now I've doubled down on my anger and betrayal. So, here's the deal. If we don't talk to them, we will talk about them. That's what's going to happen. If we don't go to that person, we will eventually talk about them, and everybody else will know, and we've actually betrayed them over and over again by our own hurt, by talking about, you know what this is? Yeah, you agree with me, yeah. And then 12 people have all agreed that this person is a jerk because I've done. How Jesus is that? It's not at all. And so we betray that relationship by whispering behind other people's back, exposing their weaknesses and sin. And we may mask our betrayal by saying we Christianize all kinds of stuff. Well, I'm just looking for some counsel and some advice. And just want to be able to kind of get your input on this, about this guy being a real jerk to me. So I just wanted to see what you might say. So sometimes we'll do that. We do it by prayer requests sometimes too. We call that gossip sometimes. But we need to look back and see how we've spoken negatively far too many times to too many people. Our real goal many times doesn't look like we're trying to get help. And yeah, you've been wronged and it's not fair. They should not be allowed to do that or not be allowed to say that. They can't get by with that. Or I could just do the Gomer thing. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible. Just terrible. Well, that's close to Charles Barkley, too. Anyway, Francis Frangipane says, people don't stumble over boulders. They stumble over stones, relatively small things. The scripture in Hebrews 12:15 says, see to it that no one falls short of the grace of God and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. The idea of no bitter root is borrowed from a Deuteronomy passage. And it speaks to the idea of small beginnings, the root of a plant. You know, typically what? You can't see it. You can't see the root developing, and all of a sudden, you've got something coming up. Now, a small little single tomato seed. We used to have 2 lots, one on each side of us in Cape Coral. They're now building. There's houses now on both of them. But you could throw, instead of putting stuff in the garbage, we would compost, and sometimes we had tomatoes, we had watermelons growing up in the neighbor's yard that would creep up. Like, oh yeah, we threw that over there. Yeah, okay, that's cool. Anyway, y'all know what a beggar weed is? A beggar weed. It is a nasty weed that produces hundreds of these little sticky covered with, they're those things. They're those things, or tagalongs, yeah, or the name of a Girl Scout cookie. So, right? Well, I tell you what, when you're working out in the yard, and not only do you get them on your work shorts, but they get on the inside of your shorts. Come on. Seriously? And you got they stay around for a long time. And they just get on all kinds of stuff and they stay. They're amazing little. Anyway, you got to pull these things by the roots. Because if you mow, you're spreading them on everything. That's what they look like when they're on something, those little things. Anyway, I'm still trying to conquer those in the yard. Now, I hate these as much, but they don't hurt as much as the dreaded sandspur. I hate to say that I hate anything that God created, but I'm not a fan of the sandspur. I have eradicated, disposed of, and eliminated all the sandspurs. So you see what that plant looks like. That plant is nasty. This is what it looks like when you step on it. Right there. So, if you ever done this, you know what I'm talking about. And so when you pull it out, you know what happens? You see your skin pull out too with it because it's like in there and it's like hooked up in there. It is nasty, nasty little thing. That thing dries out. Man. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. And so we had been there for 20 years up at this house. And like I said, we had a lot on each side. Now, I thought we continued to eradicate. I mean, dig out with a shovel. I don't care whether there's a hole there or not. These things got to go. Because I really do. I like walking around barefoot. Quite honestly, I do. But you stop doing it after a while. You know, when I first moved to that was just nasty. It was a multi-year battle. And you know who I was battling? Empty lot guys, okay? Because they got bush hogs over there. They're just mowing. You know what? That stuff gets thrown back in there. You're still like, I can't eradicate 2 empty lots full. It's hard enough to do this. But I'm telling you, it was a 3-year battle of digging every single year. Because you know that everything you dug, especially if they're brown, they don't stay on the plant. They go back down, they make more. And so you can see how one seed can cause a bitter root. You let anything like this get in your heart, this offense, and you can see this heart of offense, how you can eventually get to the point of a calloused, cold heart. It's just a nasty place to be. Like stumbling over a small stone, so it is with a little offense. Left unattended, it takes root. It will be a bitter root, and the end result, as I quote, it will be later, it will cause trouble and defile or corrupt many. In the middle of this process, our hearts go cold, they go callous, they go hardened, and some of you know what that actually looks like. You either have been there or you know someone who has a hard heart. There's no wonder the scriptures speak of this condition being so alarming that it affects, defiles, and corrupts others. It leaves people lonely and bitter and angry and really resistant to the gospel, really resistant to relationship, and really resistant to anything loving and kind. And it's hard to even compliment someone with a cold heart. It's hard to encourage them. Well, I just wanted to be nice. Well, why do you want to be nice? It's kind of like the guy that I remember in high school, one of our girls in the band, she played French horn. She wanted to be a candy striper. It was like, that's pretty cool. I had never heard of that term before anyway. But she wanted to go help in the hospital and wheel people around. And she said, you wouldn't believe it. So we were with a group, after band. And she says, you wouldn't believe what happened. I said, what? She says, I was wheeling around this guy. And I said, isn't it a nice sunny day? And the guy goes, I hate the sun. That's what I'm talking about. That kind of stuff where you're just going, how did that work out? I mean, that's really hard stuff. Or you're just really tired. I mean, that's what we do with little kids when they do fun. Well, they're just tired, right? Okay. I was just trying to use that. But you guys don't remember that. You're in grandchildren area, so never mind that. One aspect that is also dangerous this is really important, to minimize or pretend we are not offended. This is a huge deal. I mentioned it earlier. We brush it off. We say it's not a big deal. If we truly have been offended and we blow it off, then the danger is that it manifests itself as a bitter root and we become cold and we're unaware of it. When you're an unaware, grumpy person who is bitter and has developed a cold heart and you can't see it and people tell you and you get more offended because people tell you you are grumpy and have a cold heart and you just continue to be more calloused, it is a bad way to be. Let me give you a warning. Don't take personally the anger of angry people. Now, that sounds really cool. Don't take personally the anger of angry people, or you will find yourself reacting just like them. This is huge, by the way. When you get offended at angry people and you become angry, you are them. You are the person that you are angry with because now you're there. That's an amazing place to get there when you think about, wait, but this is like if you don't want to take personal responsibility, then you say, they made me angry. You have no self-control, and you are just a joystick that can be taken anywhere by people's emotions, right? You have no self-control, you have no brain, you have no will. Here's the deal. Resist being offended. But if you do react in anger, be sure that you are on your way to develop a bitter root and becoming just like what you hate in them. Now, the men's group has gone through a study by Brant Hansen. You've probably heard me mention this before, which has really kind of spurred this on. It is called Unoffendable. It is probably a podcast. It's on DVD. You can see probably pieces of it on YouTube. There is a book. I highly recommend reading this book. It is a great study to go through. Unoffendable by Brant Hansen. And it's outstanding. And I gleaned a couple of quotes from him out of his book. And I can't do everything, but I just want to give you some real good nuggets. One of them is this. In the moment, this is all Brant Hansen. In the moment, everyone's anger always seems right. We talked about this in men's group, talking about righteous anger and how we really pretty much, as humans, can't really pull that one off very well. We like the word righteous anger because it gives us an excuse to be able to be angry. Well, Jesus cleared the temple and was upset. Like, yeah, anytime you need to clear a temple of sinner, you can say, I have righteous anger, okay? But typically, we don't pull off righteous anger. In the moment, everyone's anger always seems righteous. Anger is a feeling, after all, and it sweeps over us and tells us we're being denied something we should have. It provides its own justification, but an emotion is just an emotion. It's not critical thinking. Anger doesn't pause. We have to stop and we have to question it. Now, that's actually discipline. It takes work. Anything that you want to do, whether it's losing weight or get better at your golf swing or fish where the fish are, you've got to actually learn, understand, ask questions. You just don't assume, yeah, I've been doing this for 40 years. I know what I'm doing. I don't need help. I'm good. And so the deal is when we recognize emotion in ourselves, or we have someone who really loves us well, who can say, that you're looking like, man, Elaine does this. I love her for it, and this is not something I enjoy. But at the same time, I'm so glad that I can have somebody put their hand up like that and go, the thing that you're complaining about is the thing that you are becoming. And that was way before Brant Hansen. I mean, she just does that so good. And I at the moment, I really want to go, like, that's not good timing right then. But it's really good timing because it really just puts on the anti-lock brake and just stops things to go, I know it's true. I know that's true from her. So I really appreciate it. Here's another one. So how about taking this idea to all of our experience? You really can't believe politicians would lie? This is Brant. You can't believe a preacher would cheat on his wife? You can't believe someone would try to steal from you? You can't believe a neighbor would set off fireworks at 2 a.m.? You can't believe a world leader would tyrannize his own people? Brant Hansen, are we going to live in a perpetual shock at the nature of man? Seriously, why continue to be surprised at the actions of people in sin when we live in a very sinful culture? Now, that doesn't mean we get callous to the effects of sin. You know, when we're talking about people who are starving, people who are under tyranny, we're called to pray, we're called to help, we're called to give in any possible way. But we don't have to continue to go, believe it again? Like, somehow we've put people at a higher spot than what they should be. We've elevated them because our disappointment level is, because what happens when we get disappointed in people or we're shocked, it's then hard to love them because we're offended. Why, I cannot believe that. Instead of going as a Christian, Man, that brother needs some prayer. He's in a bad way. It's a different viewpoint, how we actually elevate people so then when they crash and fall, we're ready to be judge, juror, and execution, as opposed to someone who could come alongside of them. Another quote. Quit trying to parent the whole world. I ain't looking at you, bro. Quit trying to parent the whole world. Quit offering advice when exactly 0 people are asking for it. Well, if they would listen to me, man, does that put you in just a bummer of a place? Just bummer. Quit being shocked when people don't share your morality. Quit serving as judge and jury in your own mind of that person who just cut you off in traffic. Sorry you're out there actually watching us, brother. But anyway, quit thinking you need to discern what others' motives are. Oh, man. I've been there on that one. I've prejudged people's motives without actually knowing what's going on behind the backstory. And quit rehearsing in your mind what that other person did to you. It's deadly stuff. One last one. I'll let you read the whole book, but I wanted to bring these 4 quotes. The last one. Whenever there's an injury to a relationship, a hurt, a broken heart, or even a broken thing, and you are willing to forgive, you are saying, I got this. I'm going to pick up the bill here. This, of course, is exactly what Jesus did for us. This idea that going, I've got this. I am not going to let you do. Why? Because I'm going to have a heart that's not going to get calloused or be easily offended. And I look here and I'm going, something's going on here which I really need to love deeper. And that's not the typical human reaction when we're offended. It's usually to be angry and fist up. It's to go, wow, there's some pain and hurt here, and let me recognize that. How can I bless you? How can I be a blessing to you? Romans 5 says this, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this, while we were sinners. Not when we made things right, because we can't. Not when we stopped sinning, because we can't. But while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. For if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? In Colossians chapter 3, 12 and 13, since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults. That's a very heavy sentence, by the way. Make allowance for each other's faults, and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Here's the deal. I know, because I've lived there. I've lived there with the idea of hanging on to stuff, and I know what it means to hang on to it for months and years. Some of you, I'm asking to really seek God and his heart so that you can be free. That's what's waiting on the other side, because everybody will continue, especially the people you love, will continue to hurt you. It ain't going to stop just because you go, oh, I've forgiven you, everything's good. Do you think it's going to stop if you're going to be intimate in relationships? It's still going to be there. Do you think the world's going to get all of a sudden nicer because you forgave? Or you're going to look at the world and go, maybe they might get it sometime they might get it. So I'm asking you, if you need prayer, if you need to seek reconciliation with God, if you need forgiveness, this is a great time to maybe be free for one of the first times in a long time. You're welcome to come forward. We'd love to pray with you. If you want to surrender your life to Christ, you're welcome to do that as well. The invitation is open as the ladies come forward. And let's stand up and sing and ponder if God is speaking to your heart in regards with letting some stuff go.